I'm always fascinated in the similarity between characters. Now, obviously, Harrison is going to have a lot of things in common with Dexter, but as I was rewatching the first two seasons of the original show, I noticed that he had a number of things in common with his dad's old nemesis, James Doakes. Before we begin, there will be spoilers for the original Dexter, as well as New Blood and Resurrection. The first thing they have in common is largely absent dads. Doakes, as we see during the first two seasons, is very much having some recurring contact with his mother and his sisters. His dad only gets mentioned, I think, 2 times when he's talking to LaGuardia about starting his own butcher shop, and then I think Lundy says something along the lines of him being abusive. And what's interesting is that if you're, a lot of us have to remember, I know it's sometimes kind of hard to put it all into perspective, but Harrison only had Dexter as a constant figure in his life until he was about 4, when the original series ended and he goes off with Hannah for, the remainder until New Blood, until she, of course, until she passed away. Now, they both have multiple siblings who they're not close with. So when Dexter catches Doakes in his little trap, he mentions that he doesn't visit his sisters, after, like, as a counterpoint to Doakes saying that he has a mother and sisters. And it's the same thing with Harrison, where as far as we've been led to believe as viewers, they could reveal something else in season 2 or further of Resurrection. But as far as we know, Harrison has not been in contact with either Astor or Cody since before he went to Argentina. Oh, and this is a big one. Both have shot Dexter. Now, what's interesting is that Doakes, even though he's, Dexter's nemesis for those first 2 seasons, he did it unintentionally while he and Dexter were wrestling with the gun, and it went off and he got blasted in the leg. Whereas Dexter directed Harrison to shoot him fatally. And in both instances, of course, Dexter survives. But again, it's like, how many other characters, hero and villain alike, have shot Dexter? Both were for a time the only person in Dexter's life that knew his secret and urged him to turn himself in. This is kind of interesting because season 8 reveals Vogel, who helped Harry make the code. I think she's been retconned out of existence. She's not mentioned in Original Sin. They don't talk about her after season 8. So I just kind of put season 8 on like a semi-canon basis. But if we're going off of season 8, this means that while Vogel was one of 2 living people who knew what Dexter was, Doakes was the only living person who was in Dexter's life for however many days it was between when he was captured by Dexter and then when Lila blew up the cabin. And this is the same thing with Harrison, where when he was a child, and didn't know what his dad was, first you had Lumen and then you had Hannah, and after he finds out, by the time he finds out that what his dad being a serial killer, Hannah is deceased, but Lumen is still alive, somewhere out in the ether. So it's that same commonality where there might be that person who's like far off removed from Dexter that knows what he is, but in terms of the people that he sees every day, there's that one person who knows that he's a killer, that there's like in frequent contact with him. And at one point, Doakes had that role, then Deb had that role, and now Harrison has that role. Now, after learning Dexter's a killer, they both have one instance where they work with him. So Doakes and Dexter teamed up against the drug smugglers that were trying to get Doakes to put the coke on the boat, as he called it. And Harrison obviously teamed up with Dexter against Kurt Caldwell. And let's not forget, Doakes and Harrison, while they're not serial killers, they are killers themselves. Doakes had multiple officer-related shootings, some of which we saw right during the second season. And Harrison was very violent during New Blood, and also his killing of Ryan Foster, kicks off the whole series of Resurrection. And what's really interesting is that with both of them, there's this very obvious sense of, self-righteousness. Like, I had to, get rid of this person. They're trying to shoot me, or they're trying to, rape this woman. And it's one of the reasons why their relationships with Dexter are so interesting, because they have, like, Dexter has his code, but they have their own version of that where they can justify killing, right, in terms of trying to save someone else. Like, they're certainly more moral than he is, and they have more excuses to kind of like pretend that they're not similar in the respect of taking a life. This one's a little bit more on the nose, and you could argue I'm reaching, but because this is like a thing with Dexter characters in general, but both attempted having a relationship with a coworker, but were rebuffed. So you had Doakes trying to get with LaGuerta, and for a time they were together, but then when he tried to marry her, she gave him back the ring. We saw that in the flashback in the season 7 finale. And with Harrison and Elsa, there was the appearance of her liking him, and then of course he found out when he tried to kiss her that she rebuffed his advances. So it's that same thing of like, they have this coworker who they feel something for, and if they want to, progress it to a certain degree, the coworker kind of like backs off and goes, yeah, this is not what I signed up for. And just to wrap this up, I find it extremely interesting that it's like Doakes dies in the season 2 finale, right? The exact next episode after that ends with Rita telling Dexter that she's pregnant. So in a way, the second that Doakes is taken out of the story, we're not introduced to Harrison, but we're like on our way to meeting him, in the next season after that one, where like the whole concept of Dexter becoming a dad is communicated in the exact next episode after Doakes' passing. I don't know, I just found this whole concept very interesting, because I think, it's very easy to say, oh, Harrison is like his dad. Obviously we have the symbolism of, him finding his mother in blood as Dexter did with his. But in terms of Harrison as a character, there are a lot of commonalities between him and Doakes, and then him and Deb, and I'll do a video on him and Deb and their commonalities as well. But I just find these very interesting, where you can take two characters who never even interacted, were on the show for completely different sets of time removed over 10 years apart, and go, hey, this one did this, and this one also did that, and this one also did this. And to have stuff line up in such a way where there's maybe like one other character where that's applicable, but for the most part, it's like those two specifically have these several things in common. So thanks for watching.